where we prototype different systems. So we have about 20 people working in the space right now, a combination of programmers, scientists, user experience people. But our job here is trying to essentially streamline the bioengineering process. Now, my favorite organism in the world is E. coli. It's the main constituent of the microbiome of your gut. It does a lot of processing of your food. There's other bugs in there. I absolutely enjoy this organism. I've been studying it for about 20 years. You never really look at sausages the same way after working with E. coli, but they're an amazing little creature because, you know, what they teach us ultimately is that life is the ultimate manufacturing platform. E. coli is a factory for over 5,000 different metabolites. It has 5,000 different genes. It is working all the time, 24/7. Biotechnology can actually make machines we cannot manufacture at the nanoscale. It builds bottom up, from the molecules on up. This is what's called a flagellar motor. E. coli has a little whip-like hair that it uses to swim through media. This is the motor that powers it. And if you're familiar with mechanics, you can probably see it kind of looks like an electrical motor. It has a clutch. It has this long hair-like device, the flagellum. This is an incredible machine that self-assembles at the nanoscale. We don't know how to build these structures yet with any technology. The motor itself actually operates at up to 100,000 RPM. I'm just using this as an example of some of the incredible engineering that biology does that we're starting to understand and get some access to. The beautiful thing about biology, as we all know, is that it's self-manufacturing. One bacterium can divide in peak conditions about every 15 minutes. So one bacterium will become billions overnight. And of course, our whole planet is a living world, which is why just about every energetic niche is filled with living organisms, from the smallest to the largest. This is really, when you talk about reality capture in biology, it is actually physical hunt down, catch, and preserve. It's kind of what biologists have been doing for really hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's not that much fun sometimes, and you end up with a whole bunch of organisms in a jar, and I think I've got a slide out of place. But I also want to point out that E. coli, like all living things, are programmable. This is actually the genome of an E. coli. Step on it, it kind of comes out of it. It's only about as much information as a single photograph on your phone, but it's enough to encode a very complex living organism. You only have to understand one language to program these organisms too, all the way from E. coli to us. DNA is not just one programming language for living things, it is the programming language for living things. And so if you learn how to be fluent in the genetic language, you can do a vast array of engineering. In fact, today, I don't even talk to kids using the language of biology most of the time because it's really esoteric. Not many people understand it. If you're studying molecular biology, it might make some sense. But really, almost everyone today understands the language of computers. We understand the idea of electronic components. We understand that they make circuits. We understand what a computer is and that it forms networks. Well, that's engineering, software engineering, hardware engineering. Biology has done the exact same thing, but by building it bottom up, using very different componentry that self-assembles, makes very complex circuits, makes metabolic circuits, ultimately makes free living cells that you can think of as really little squishy computers. And these computers form much more sophisticated networks. Organ systems, ultimately, you know, our cells and ecosystems. So this is, the world of computing is actually opening up the world of biology conceptually in many ways. Capturing, as I said, is really about going and collecting these things and putting them in jars and trying to understand some of the form and function and of these different organisms. We've gone on a global cataloging effort, and really we've only scratched the surface. Estimates are that we've only discovered about 10% of the large organisms on our planet, which is a little surprising. We've been here a while. And that's a very low percentage. But remember, the oceans are the largest, cover the largest area on our planet, and they're the hardest to explore, at least at deep levels. And then there's the things you can't see, the microbes. We've barely been able to scratch the surface of those creatures. But it's more than just capturing the organs. Today we can go and sample everything from a cancer cell in a body to look at the gene expression of a single cell. This is just a type of technique where we look at what genes are turned on and off, and much deeper. DNA sequencing is a form of reality capture in the biological space. It's the one thing we all have in common with every living life form. We can go and just read the genetic code, digitize it, now we can get it into the computer. But even devices like your Fitbit or your phone are capturing data about you, a biological organism, and digitizing and putting it in the world. Reality capture in life science, it really goes across the board. Sequencing, though, is a really exciting one because it's allowing us to study virtually everything, even the invisible. Today, the state-of-the-art machines are like the one that you see here on the left. This is an Illumina sequencing machine. It's basically a state-of-the-art job. It will actually do a human genome in less than a day. They're robotic, they just run 24/7. The one on the right is kind of where things are going. These machines are big, and then they get progressively smaller. The smallest ones use nanopore systems. They're about the size of a USB stick. The early access program for this device has just been opening up. Kind of get to see where this is going. There's been no faster moving technology than DNA sequencing. It's been moving extremely quickly. We are not the leaders in DNA sequencing. Ultimately, it's a labor-intensive task to prep the DNA and load it in the machines. The Chinese have taken the global market on this. They do about 40% of the world's DNA sequencing based at this facility called BGI in Shenzhen. If you go into Shenzhen, it's just banks and banks and banks of Illumina sequencers. It's really fascinating, but their real strength is their people. When I was there a couple of years ago, I met 4,000 young bioinformatics scientists that were under the age of 25. It was really remarkable. It is an incredible facility that is essentially a factory for churning out DNA and understanding it, and even Bill Gates shows up every now and then. It's an exciting place. Now, all of that data, whether it's from your Fitbit, whether it's from DNA sequence, ultimately all this actually has to be computed in some way, and I can't really go into details on this because the field is rapidly evolving, it's changing. It is a big data science. The former head of Dell Healthcare surprised me when he told me just how much they were selling into health IT space. Billions and billions of dollars, giant sales force. There is more information about biology being generated every day than we know what to do with. This is just a map of one single cell's general metabolism. It's a circuit diagram. It's not a very good one because it actually, well, number one, it's static, and two, it doesn't capture the real dynamism that is life. It turns out that none of these circuits are actually fixed. They have a whole bunch of different side reactions they can do, but you can get a taste, just a taste, of the complexity of the gross wiring diagram in a single cell. People are using this information in new ways, though, to create new value. I used this service a few months ago when my wife and I were trying to have a baby. It basically just takes DNA, analyzes it from both parents, and does a statistical analysis of what the likelihood of rare diseases will be. And if it flags it as above a certain threshold, they'll contact you for follow-ups. Of course, 23andMe uses a very similar type system, and now there's even groups that will assay your microbiome, essentially the bacteria on your skin, in your mouth, etc. Today, we're even starting to analyze the genetics of longevity, because ultimately our aging processes affect so many of our health issues. But the real fun isn't capturing and computing, it's in creating. Creating life. If you have children, you kind of know some of the joy in that. I've created bacteria, which is a different kind of love, but kind of fun. This is where you create life if you're a bioscientist. It's in a complicated kitchen like this. They're expensive, they're hard to learn the different cooking procedures, cleaning up the lab is a pain too. It's a big bottleneck. It would be so much easier if we could just compile DNA quickly, just print it. And in fact, this is where Austin will be telling you about some of the technology he's been creating for the last few years. But suffice it to say, we can just print DNA now. And this field is called synthetic biology. And what it just means is now we write genetic code like we used to write computer code. Now we're starting to see factories using this code and actually turning it into different outputs. In this case, it's a factory that wants to go make yeast. That's all they do. They'll just go and make different engineered yeast. This is a factory that takes the outputs of that and actually runs experiments in the cloud. Now you don't need to have that complicated lab. You can just send orders to this company called Transcriptic, and they'll run your experiments on robots. Now there's even a maker bot for doing these types of robotic experiments on your desk. This is a liquid handling robot that costs a couple thousand. It's completely open source. You can download protocols and experiments. I get my first one delivered in a week. And there's also online services called contract research. This is Assay Depot. They essentially do almost any research procedure you can imagine just through an online interface. So there's a fundamental shift in the architecture that's happening here. It's really incredibly powerful, and it's empowering people that would never otherwise have thought of going into life science to actually explore the space. And it is creating a whole new branch to the tree of life that we call Synthetica. It's still a very short branch, but it's going to grow quite quickly. We've got a whole new community of programmers coming into it. This program, based out of Boston, has now trained over 20,000 students in these new digital biotechnologies. And some of the work is breathtaking, not only in the scope, but in the speed at which it's being done by some very young practitioners. We're seeing kind of a DIY culture emerge as well. These were people that created home labs while they were doing their schooling. Now they run different things. We've also seen a do-it-together culture, kind of a community lab space appear. Kind of a gym membership model. For $100 a month, you get access to a lab, learn different procedures. Quite fun. It's even changing the economics. Y Combinator, known for investing in software startups, recently started accepting biotech startups because the costs of doing this type of work has dropped so dramatically. And this weekend, IndieBio, one of the first dedicated incubators to biotech, is opening their doors. They give $50,000 in funding plus lab space and mentorship to go and build next generation biotech companies. It's going to get a little weirder in the application space. Faster, better, cheaper, when it's biotech, is really a little weirder. Sean Douglas will tell you about what he makes. Not so weird, actually pretty cool. But here's some other examples. Glowing plants. This changes the idea of what's a biotech company. How it was funded by Kickstarter, the only one that was funded on Kickstarter. It's moving along quite well. This company is re-engineering yeast so that it can make milk. Brew milk instead of beer. Why grow a whole cow if all you want is the milk? We're going to see some really interesting beers come out, by the way, because I've seen some things like cannabinoids be put into yeast as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. People are doing things like color-changing flowers, making whole synthetic bacteria, or at least writing the whole synthetic genomes. And I've been playing with viruses. Not harmful viruses, but viruses that are just toxic to bacteria. They're kind of natural antibiotics. And was really successful last year in kind of taking Autodesk into this world by making Autodesk's first synthetic virus. It's kind of like 3D printing a virus. Right now, we're exploring this space because there's so many opportunities to go and engineer really powerful things quickly and cheaply. And I'll just leave you with this thought. Again, manufacturing is the key here. What can you design digitally, manufacture digitally, create digitally to do powerful things in the world? Right now, the semiconductor industry, which has been powering all the digital revolution, has a clear line of sight from where they are now at the state of the art, which is about 11 nanometer resolution of features on electronic chips, to about 5 nanometers, which is a really, really small feature size. Below 5 nanometers, they know they have to start tapping into the mechanisms of self-assembly of living systems. So in the next 10 to 20 years, a lot of the R&D money that currently goes into chip fabs will start to move into biofabs and understanding these technologies, because only life knows how to build truly from the bottom up. In 20 years, I really wonder if we'll be sitting here with our cell phones that have been grown almost from the molecular level. We'll see.